and welcome again. Today to our third conversation in our series Veni ad Regnum Tuum, Thy Kingdom Come. We began with a general overview of what we're up to in this particular series, and last time we talked with a Bible scholar and educator, Dr. Elaine Park, how in fact this notion of the kingdom of heaven plays out in her life. Today, let's talk to an artist. Now, as we know, of course, there are many different art forms. Visual arts, including painting, sculpture, and whatnot, literary arts, writing, poetry, various other kinds of writing, and of course, performing arts. Today, we will speak to a performing artist, one with a long resume of wonderful work, both as an actor, as a director, and as a producer. Not to mention his work in digital work and in film work. Today, let's talk with Leonardo de Filippis. Pay attention to what he says about how he acquired the name St. Luke Productions for his production company. He fell in love with theater as a young man. I recognize that very well in my own life, having spent years and years in theater work and theater production also. One of his role models was St. John Vianney, one of the characters, in fact, whom he plays in his various stage presentations. And one of the things that Leonardo will say that I want you to watch out for is his notion of peace, that only God can make peace. We think we can, we cannot. Only God can really make peace in our lives and in our world. In doing this, we must, Leonardo insists, be aware of evil and how evil plays in our lives and in the life of the world. Also, watch for what he has to say about the common good. As I've mentioned before, the common good will be a continuing thing that I will ask each one of our interviewees as we proceed along in these conversations. So, without further ado, let's hear what Leonardo de Filippis, wonderful man, wonderful actor, producer, director, what he has to say about the kingdom of heaven here and now in his life as well. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Michael, and all the parishioners there, and whoever else is going to see this
Whoever else
throughout the
watches
world.
it.
Yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. Can you give us just a quick little background of yourself and who you are and how you ended up doing the marvelous things that you've done?
Well, to make a long story short, I got involved in acting in high school and in college, and then I didn't take it seriously till I went to after college. I was an English degree. I had an English literature degree, and then eventually what happens is I start auditioning. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area at this point, and I got jobs at different repertoire companies there, and took classes at what we call the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and then eventually I go to the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, and which was a big company down there, and still is. But then I eventually go to Colorado Shakespeare Festival, and then Ashland, Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I started getting on a track of Shakespearean festivals, getting to know Shakespeare, etc. And then what happens is I have a reconversion to the Catholic faith, and not sure what I'm supposed to do as an act. Should I act? Should I become a priest? What am I doing here? And so eventually, what happens is I do an experiment of a play that I had heard of an actor, an English actor called Sir Alec MacCallum, who did the Gospel of Mark. He was the first to kind of get that. He eventually did it off Broadway, which as a recitation with a sports coat on, and just memorized the Gospel. So I undertook the Gospel of Luke, which hadn't been done at this time in the country or the world, I'm not sure, but and that's how we got our name, St. Luke Productions.
Okay, I was wondering about that.
And it was an experiment, an artistic, spiritual experiment. Didn't know if I would continue, and then from then on, I've been doing this now for 40 years.
What did you find, as an old theater guy myself, what did you find to be particularly attractive about theatrical expression as the art form that you wanted to pursue?
Well, I think that I fell in love with theater. That was my first love before film or anything. is that first of all, I was pretty shy and nervous as a young kid. I'm probably still nervous, but and maybe shy in my own way.
Mystique of it all.
Yeah, the kind of the mystique. But I enjoyed the live interaction of the art form, and not only working with the other cast or other actors and actresses, but you have a crew, and it's a communal art form.
Okay, so now let's look at the things that the concrete things that you've actually done.
Yeah.
Can you go back and pick one or two pieces out of all the work that you've done over the years that you think really exemplifies this notion, that you would hope at least that your viewers, your audiences will take as here's an exemplification of the kingdom of God?
Well, the kingdom of God, I think, too, is, on the earthly plane and spiritual plane, like the Beatitudes. When I do the gospel of blessed are the poor, when you do that and you live it, and turning the other cheek, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, which is the ultimate standard of charity. Because if as Jesus says, if you love those who love you, what merit is to you? So that's easy. We all want the easy thing. But if someone disagrees with you, I don't want to have anything to do with it. But if you love your enemies and take that to be an argument with your wife or with a relative or a friend or a business person or whoever, or within the church, how do you love them? Even the ones of course, how do you love the Philistines and the Babylonians and the Nazis and the communists, all that kind of, the revolutionaries, etc., who may have persecuted you or persecuted your family? That's the ultimate. Why? Because Jesus died for them too, and He created them. So that's why I find that's one concrete example. I think.
Can you think of an example in one of your stage presentations or one of your films even that exemplifies what you would hope your people would take from this?
Well, I think, a lot of times for example, Saint John Vianney is an example. He's kind of a radical in his own way, that he goes, God holds everything in His hands. We do not. And I think he says that in the play. And, and I have to proclaim it every night when I do the performance.
Sure.
I think, there's a sense of his anxiety, his nervousness, his tears are to do with he's responsible as a pastor for his parishioners.
Right.
To do what? To go to heaven. He's not a good pastor or priest if he doesn't accomplish his job. In other words, he takes this very seriously. So he says, they are my sheep. And I think, you'll know his voice, as it says in the Gospel of John. So I think that he takes that so seriously, and that's why you'll see him weeping, doing penance. He doesn't do it for himself. He does it for others. And it's the same with when I perform St. Francis of Assisi. How do you create peace and justice? Well, you have to do sacrifice. You have to suffer, in a sense. You have to give up things. Because who can make peace? Only one person. Not St. Francis, not St. John Vianney, not Maximilian Kolbe or St. Peter. It's only God Himself.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where we get mixed up about the kingdom of heaven, what you're talking about, is that we think we can do it. In other words, we take hold of it. And we say, oh, I did such a great thing. Right. Even spiritually.
It's our project.
It's our project, I'm preaching the gospel, and that was a great sermon, or whatever. That was a great show. But if anything happens that's significant in changing someone's life in any way, in a positive way, or stirs up in their mind to think about the kingdom, then it's God's success, not ours,
Well, one of the things that I tend to be kind of obsessed about is the notion of the common good, the bonum commune. Can you see in your work how you may have, and intentionally I suspect, promoted the notion of the common good, of taking care of one another?
Well, I think, well, a couple things in that regard. It's still, again, focused on the content and the subject matter that we do. You know, we, instead of doing, if you were to say profane art, which is, you know, I can do a painting of you, or you can do a painting of me, but if we do a painting of Jesus or a painting of the Madonna, the mother and child, that has a different, it echoes a different stirring in our heart throughout the universe, because it makes us focus on that which is above, and we're kind of, so to speak, below in this world. However, we're images of God.
Yeah.
So
Always.
So we're always an image of God. So if I look at anyone, but Jesus helps, or a picture of Jesus helps me remind me, oh, you're also an image of God, of Him, or you're striving to be too. So I think that common good, when I do the saints or the scriptures, I see the thread of goodness and charity. And I think that those foundational things that we need, that are so, you know, and I think when I see the reaction, say, to be it St. Faustina or St. Therese is a good example. The little way. What's the little way? Those things re-echo, you know, they give people encouragement. They see that they struggled themselves, but they didn't give up. They ran the race, and I think they got up if they fell down, or God helped them get up, and they continued. And I think that common good is what you mentioned, is not to be fractured, not to be divided, not to have disunity. And I think to have the common good, you have to be aware of evil.
Yes.
You have to be, I think too many of us are not, we talk about the presence of God, but the presence of evil is important, because I think it's now St. Paul VI, you can't have good without evil to distinguish them. You've got to know that fire, you know, little Johnny, don't put your hand near the fire. It's hot.
Don't do that.
It's danger.
Absolutely.
So I think that, you know, there's hell and there's heaven, right? And I think in the presence of evil is important, because once you recognize evil, and the real person of evil, the devil, Satan, Lucifer, but at the same time, our own evil within ourselves, our own inclinations, if we can control those things, why do we control them? For the common good, so that we can do what you mentioned. So I think that's the thread, and it's it's like the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. They do not recognize Jesus, right? They're worried, their anxiety, the prophet has been killed, all their hopes have been dashed, their leader's gone, they'll never defeat the Romans or the Jewish elders, etc. And so, but they don't recognize that he's walking right next to them.
Right there.
And I think the great thing about the common good, it's about the word recognition. If you don't recognize him in your life, and in the presence, or in the church, or in the Eucharist, then you're not going to have common good.
You're really not. So look at your own life. Do you think that in your life you have done things that are good in your work, in the work that you've done?
Yeah, I think
you would have done
even
that's good.
I'm grateful at what St. Therese talks. I'm grateful for my imperfections, or I am great. I work in weakness, and I think I've had to do so many humiliating things. Doing theater and making so many mistakes, and especially live, and being exhausted or sick or having legs hurting or whatever. I've been injured so many times, but you're like an athlete getting in the game still, because the championship game, you keep going, and I think I guess that God has used me. I've seen a lot of things happen that have in reactions where people have either come back to the church, or they've gone into the priesthood, or they've gone into religious life, or they've gotten married, or they have children now, or people have been healed in some form or another, psychologically or physically. So I've seen that, and I go, well, God used that in that instant, that moment, that particular saying, or be it if I have performed on the radio, or through the electronic formats, or live, you know, that person said, "You were looking at me."
Yeah.
That saint was looking at me and saying it right to me. So that was, I just randomly, not randomly, but I just, in the technique of acting, I look a certain way and I just look right at you.
Absolutely.
And they think, "Oh my gosh."
Oh my God. He's
So I think God,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think he has, just as a priest would say, "Well, yeah, I'm weak, but you know, things have happened and people have sustained." So it's been an incredible experience, particularly performing to so many different aspects within the church. You know, the church is quite vast and diverse, and so I've had the privilege, really, the gift or grace, to be able to perform in all these different aspects, and in secular modes too. I've had that opportunity.
Do you have, and you've done such a breadth of work, do you have a particular moment of which you are the proudest?
The proudest. I don't know. That's a tall word to be. I am so proud of what I have accomplished.
No. It's just something you did.
We tore down the wall. You know, whatever. Berlin is free. No, I think that some of them, I guess, really, there's been moments in when I've done the saints. You know, I've had some. Maybe it's not so much proud, but the gratitude maybe might be a better word, where I perform.
Word, yeah.
Say, for example, I perform for, say, with Maximilian Kolbe, which is he died in Auschwitz in World War II, and you know, in 1941, and I have performed for people who were with him in the concentration camp, or I have performed for people who were in gulags, who survived, etc. Women, or they were children, or men, or priests. And so when you are performing these and seeing them weep and be shaken and things of that nature, it shakes your soul, and you ponder upon this, but yet I still have to keep performing. So there are those kind of gifts. Or probably another very mysterious thing would be doing the Gospel of John, which is doing the entire Gospel, which I was crazy to do it at the time, but I did it.
That's a little daunting.
I did it at the age of 33. That's when I started, and I was a kid then too, but I was the age of Jesus, but I can remember moments doing it where I felt Jesus flowing through me.
Yeah, right there.
And there'd be moments, and you can't, as an actor or as a person, a lot of people, you can't attach yourself to it. You want to have it again, that great feeling. John of the Cross talks about this all the cross. We've also performed his life too,
Yes.
but the great Carmelite saint. But you don't want to ever attach yourself to anything spiritual either. So I think those are moments I would say that I would be, if you were to say proudest there, I'm more like, wow, God gave me those opportunities, you know, or to meet a person who says, I would greet them as the director of shows, and I'd say, why are you here to see the life of Divine Mercy and St. Faustina? She's in a wheelchair, she's very ill, she has cancer, and she says, I want to see this before I die. And I go, wow.
That's a big deal.
So that's a big deal. So when you meet, and I've had many experiences with people who are dying and performing for them, you know, things of that nature that are very beautiful.
That's fabulous. So let's say you have the opportunity to have a sit down with Jesus. Would you have any particular questions that you want answered?
Well, I would say, well,
Just a little idea.
a little idea. Maybe at those moments, I played a role in, it was called Hadrian the Seventh, which was a kind of there never was a Hadrian the Seventh, but it was a famous play at one time, and I played the role in college, and there's a line in there that says, Jesus, tell me what to do and make me do it. And I think a lot of times there's that temptation to say, oh, if you just tell me what I'm supposed to do, and just help me make it happen.
Yeah.
And I think if I were to say, help me, if I were to talk to Jesus, I would just say, help me to surrender. Because my famous,
yeah.
my most the antiphon in the scriptures. I mean, in the divine office,
Sure.
liturgy of the hours. My favorite one is surrender to God, and He will do everything for you. So we're all wanting to do something. We want to do something good or great or big or little, And I think if I could just surrender, you're talking about thy kingdom come. Well, if we could just surrender to the kingdom, then everything would be all at peace, right? And so if I were to ask him that, I would ask him, But then again, I'm like St. Faustina. I say, Jesus, how do you put up with all of this?
Yeah.
And I've tried to figure out how the 12 tribes of Israel are going to come together in peace. Because they're having a hard time in Israel, and they have for more than 2,000 years. So I'm trying to think of how we're going to do within the Gentiles. Everyone's so divided, and I think Jesus, how is this all going to work out? But I think it's the trust, the surrender, that it will work out. We are confident because we're not in charge, be it whatever oppressive government is in charge. They're not really in charge.
That may be the hardest part.
Yeah.
Just saying, I can't do this, but you can. And then
Right.
having at it.
Right.
So, looking back at a long and accomplished life, anything you'd do differently if you could go back and have another shot at it?
Well, that's a tricky question because, I think if I just trusted more, because I took a lot of risks. When you do art, you take risks. I put my family under a lot of pressure.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I would do this financially. I mean, we're all dependent on this ministry. I mean, just doing these arts, and if it wasn't for kind people supporting us, these things wouldn't have existed in the first place. But I think I look back then, but then I think more just trusting him that this will all work out, because there were so many times, we made the movie of St. Therese. It got into the movie theaters, but we're the smallest Catholic company ever to do anything like that in film history, and yet somehow we've survived. But we almost lost our whole company because of it, because the weight of it, the pressure of it is so tremendous from a distribution point of view. So I think, I think it's just a matter with Jesus, with God. If I were just the main thing is just to, I always love that line of John Vianney. He says, "May I see thee, may I see thee." That is the main thing we pray for. And I think that's the one thing, if I had kept saying that all the time throughout those early years. Because a lot of times, I think I thought it was dependent on me working harder. And yet I didn't need sometimes to do all that. To let go a little more.
What would you, in light of what you're saying, what would you like to see happen with your company and whatnot as time goes by? Maybe even when you're finished with this project, what would you like to see happen?
Well, I think we've chosen a very complicated art form.
Yes.
Not that theater is unique, but Catholic theater is unique.
Yeah.
Doing Catholic subject matters and stories, etc. So it's kind of sad, but we're the longest running Catholic live theater group in the country. And that doesn't mean very much, because there should be a plethora. There should be a lot.
There should be.
But it's an art form that hasn't been utilized, Michael. A lot of, music and writing and all these kind of things, different art forms have been done a lot. But theater, no, not as much. And I think we've gone more into the electronic realm. We have too. We've done films. We're doing videos more. We're doing, radio and all those kind of things. But I think the live theater I'd like to see continue. So my goal is that we'd like to pass this on, this ministry. We have a good group, but what we need, and I ask everyone to pray for us, is that what I need to find is those within the theater art forms or in the film art forms who want to do something like this. It's a different focus. It's not It's not about doing a play or a movie about some moral story or try to go around this end to try to bring God in or bring Catholicism in not, we just do it as it is, so, I mean, when you do a saint, you go, oh, that's, it is what it is. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of, I hope we can pass this on and find somebody who is crazy enough and idealistic enough to take this on, because
I love the crazy part.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and you have to stay focused, but I think it could do a tremendous amount of good. Imagine if we had going back to the medieval times when we talk about plays, theater.
Sure.
A lot of Western theater, it didn't just come from Rome and Greece, it came from the church.
It did come from the church.
So we have the high, the high stage, the low stage. Those were based off the high altar, the low altar, and when things were theatrical in the church, there was moments liturgically, how they did certain things in the rubrics, etc. And then eventually that went outside the steps of the theater and then into, the church,
Yep.
and then into theater as we know it.
Larger stage.
And so I think I would like to see if we could create a Catholic culture, and what I mean by that is that universal culture
Well,
that's embracive,
I hate to jump in.
in that way.
I've noticed in the bottom of your email address, you've got a line in there about, remember just what it is, changing the culture within the society.
Right,
That's
renew
exactly,
and renew the culture and the church.
Yeah.
Because we realized when I started this, I found that the church was so divided and didn't have much. I'm going to places where they've never seen a live drama, ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you go to a Catholic school and they don't know anything about the saints because they don't really teach as much or focus on it.
Absolutely.
It's more superficial.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, just quickly before we end, you've got two new pieces you're working on right now, Faustina piece and On Tolkien. Want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, well, we've got so many things happening. We're after the pandemic, and we're reviving all the plays again. So we'll be getting back on the road. So I'm excited about that because people, we need to get back in communion again with one another to come, hopefully, to Resurrection in all the different parishes around the country. That's one thing we're starting actually very soon, this summer and then the fall and going on. In terms of film, right away we're going to take our new play on Father Tolton, who's the first black priest in the history of the United States. Fascinating story, fascinating person. And we're going to film a live show of it. But we're doing it in our studio. And so we're going to do what we call a 3-camera shoot and then do some specials so that we can see it. It's a multimedia show, so if anyone's seen our shows like John Vianney or Faustina and even Maximilian recently, we have backdrops. Things keep changing with the screen. Sure. And we have characters. So I don't know if have you seen Tolton? Have you seen
No,
that?
I haven't seen
that.
Yet.
Well,
I'm eager to see it.
Oh, it's fantastic. I'll tell you where it's going to be. But anyway, we're working on that, and we want to get it out there in society because of the racial tension now.
Perfect time.
The misunderstanding of how race really works in history and in society, but also how do you heal and how do you bring oneness and unity to people. And I think what's so beautiful about that story is he's a priest. When you're a priest for everyone. It's not segregated in any way. That's not how Christ works. No. And so, anyway, we're hoping, so pray about that. That's a great, powerful thing. And then the other thing we're doing a play. It's based off our play called St. Faustina, Messenger of Divine Mercy.
Yes. But
we're changing the name called The Heart of Mercy.
Heart of Mercy.
Yeah. And it just so happened that in this thing, the person, if you've heard of the play, the television series The Chosen, Jonathan Rumi, who is the star of that, who plays Jesus, his first job as an actor as Jesus was, in film, on the stage was with us doing St. Faustina.
Oh, really?
So he's in our filmed version of the multimedia. So, and then we have Maria Vargo, who played the role of Saint Faustina. And so we're putting that together. But what happened was we were just going to do a simple edit of, this kind of shot of you and this shot of me. And, here's Saint Faustina, here's Jesus. And we realized that's just not going to sustain us for an hour and a half on film, that is, to record. So what I did was I now have gotten involved in CG work, and we're creating very fantastical backgrounds, so that now she'll be saying her talk in her cell in the monastery, or she'll be outside in the fountain area or in the garden, or she'll be walking down the street, or she'll be on a train. And then what's really fascinating, and probably will be a first time in history to do it, is we're actually going to create her visions where she actually goes to hell, where she goes to purgatory, where she goes to heaven, where she goes to different places, where the devil attacks her with all these demons. So we have to visually create that. And that's a tall order. Rather than just talking about it. Yeah. So that's our biggest challenge. So pray for us that we can do that, because that's probably definitely the biggest project of our 40-year history of doing that particular project.
Wow. That's fantastic.
And we're hoping to have that ready. Our goal is to have it ready by October, and the completion date of it. So and then it goes into how do we distribute it? How do you get it out there into the culture?
Wow, October, that's coming right up. So you must be way down the road as far as production is concerned.
Well, we're there. You just keep, when you're in the CG world, normally a project like this would have 12 guys working on this, or 12 men or women, editors working on this kind of thing. We only have one, and myself. So we're just plugging away. Yeah. And we keep it going, and we were fortunate over COVID, or the pandemic, or the plague, whatever you want to call it, the virus, is that people still donated money to us in order to continue this work. And that's how this film is still going.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, absolutely.
To share your life and your hopes and your wishes and the things that have happened to you.
Well, I just appreciate you, that you have come and asked these profound questions, and pray for everyone out there that you also can, really understand and deepen your understanding of the kingdom, thy kingdom come.
My thanks certainly go out to Leonardo for his wonderful words and the way in which he was more than willing to share who he is, how he sees life, and how, in fact, the kingdom of heaven plays out in his life. I love the quote that he used from Saint Therese of Lisieux, "I am grateful for my imperfections." We all should be. And then his notion, "help me to surrender." I also thought his quote from Saint Faustina, "Jesus, how do you put up with all of this?" was very telling, and as well as his constant emphasis on prayer. Thank you, Leonardo, and thank you for being with us today. We'll see you again next time, when we'll have another look at another way of life, seeking and working toward the kingdom of heaven here and now. Blessings always.